I'm Susan. Before I tell you what happened at our family barbecue, don't forget to like and subscribe for more interesting stories like this. Now let me give you some context. It was a sunny, hot day, and the backyard was filled with laughter. You could hear the delicious sizzle of burgers on the grill and the murmur of cheerful conversations. My husband, Paul, and I were hosting our annual family barbecue at his parents' house, a tradition that always brought everyone together to enjoy good food and even better memories. It was the kind of gathering where everyone felt comfortable, catching up with cold drinks and plates full of homemade food. "Susan, pass me the potato salad," Paul shouted as he expertly flipped a burger on the grill. "Sure," I replied, weaving through groups of relatives lounging on the lawn and picnic chairs. Near the grill, Paul's sister, Nancy, stood slightly apart from the lively scene, observing everything from afar with a reserved posture. Nancy had always been particular about her space, especially at her parents' house where she still had a room, although she no longer lived there. "Hey Nancy, why don't you join us for a game of cornhole?" I suggested, trying to encourage her to mingle. "No thanks, Susan, I'm just enjoying the view from here," she replied with a polite smile. But there was something in her expression, a flicker of tension hidden behind her calm demeanor. I decided not to push it further and left her alone. As the afternoon progressed, the downstairs bathroom became a high-traffic zone, with a constant line of people waiting their turn. Feeling the need to escape the growing crowd for a moment, I remembered the quieter, seldom-used bathroom upstairs. Excusing myself, I entered the house, grateful for the temporary silence as I climbed the stairs. The cool air inside was a welcome change, and the noise of the barbecue outside faded to a gentle hum. When I reached the top step, I noticed soft music filtering from Nancy's old room. It had always been her private refuge, a space she treated like a sanctuary. I felt curious, but not wanting to intrude, I continued on my way to the bathroom. The upstairs bathroom was like a hidden gem, with intricate tiles and plants that gave it a serene, almost spa-like air. The ambience was quite different from the more functional downstairs bathroom. I took a moment to appreciate the tranquility. After quickly washing up, I lingered for a few more seconds, savoring the peace before returning to the bustle of the barbecue. What I didn't know was that this brief interlude would soon lead to an unexpected discovery that would change the tone of the entire day. As I emerged from the bathroom feeling refreshed, Nancy suddenly appeared at the end of the hallway. Her face was filled with anger. "Susan, what the hell do you think you're doing?" she snapped. Startled, I stammered, "I just needed to use the bathroom. The other one was busy and I thought." "This is my bathroom," she interrupted sharply, her tone cutting. "You have no right to come in here whenever you feel like it." "Nancy, it's just a bathroom," I replied, trying to remain calm. "I didn't think it would be a problem. I'm sorry if I bothered you." Her eyes narrowed and her voice grew colder. "You should have waited downstairs. You know how I feel about my space." Attempting to de-escalate the situation, I responded softly, "I understand, Nancy, but it was urgent. I didn't mean to invade your space." Her reaction came out of nowhere without warning. Suddenly she shoved me. I stumbled backward, my feet slipped, and the world tilted around me. I flailed my arms desperately, searching for balance, but there was nothing to grab. I fell backward straight toward the stairs. The last thing I remember was the sound of my own scream echoing off the walls before everything went black. What began as a simple act of using the bathroom had turned into a nightmare. I lay curled at the bottom of the stairs, pain radiating through my arm and head. The distant murmur of the barbecue barely registered as my world spun in confusion and agony. Upstairs, Nancy stood frozen at the edge of the staircase, her face a mixture of shock and, "You pushed her." "I saw it." Paul's voice boomed as he rushed toward me. He knelt by my side, his hands checking me over. He exclaimed behind Nancy, his voice trembling with disbelief. "It was an accident." "She startled me," Nancy said in a shaky voice, although there was still a trace of anger in her tone. "Accident." Paul responded incredulously. "Nancy, you hurt her." Paul was furious as he carefully cradled my head in his lap. Nancy's tone turned defensive. "I told her not to use my bathroom. She never listens," she justified. Her words fell flat, especially amongst the growing crowd of concerned relatives. "Enough, Nancy," This isn't about a bathroom. Susan could be seriously hurt, Paul's dad said gravely, pulling out his phone to call an ambulance. I groaned, pain shooting through my body as the voices around me swirled into a confused blur. The lively barbecue had become a distant memory, replaced by the tension of the moment, a moment that had changed everything. I tried to sit up, but a jolt of pain shot through my arm, and I couldn't help but cry out. "It's broken," I whispered, my tone weak, barely audible amidst the chaos. "Why would you do something like that, Nancy?" asked Paul's aunt, her voice laced with confusion and consternation. She had come out to see what the commotion was about, and her face reflected the same mix of shock and disappointment as the rest of the family. Nancy stood motionless, her eyes darting around as if searching for an answer. "I just wanted her to respect my space," she muttered to herself, as if trying to justify her actions in her own mind. The sound of approaching sirens broke the tense silence that had fallen over the backyard. Moments later, the paramedics arrived, bringing with them swift, professional efficiency. They stabilized my arm and carefully prepared me for transport. Paul remained by my side, his hand gripping mine tightly as if silently promising me that he would be there for me, no matter what. As they wheeled me toward the ambulance, I caught a glimpse of Nancy standing apart from the others, her actions having isolated her, and the family members standing in small clusters, their faces reflecting a mixture of anger, sadness, and disappointment. "This can't just be ignored, Dad," Paul whispered to his father, determination in his voice. His words made it clear that this incident wouldn't be easily forgotten, and that it would have a lasting impact on the family dynamic. The last image I saw before the ambulance doors closed was Nancy's conflicted face, a mixture of guilt and defiance, and Paul's steady gaze, silently telling me we would face this together. The sterile smell of the hospital greeted me as I lay in the bed, the dull ache in my arm mingling with the lingering fog of medication. My head still spun from the fall and everything that had happened. Paul was nearby, pacing back and forth, his face a mixture of concern and anger. "I can't believe Nancy went this far. It's insane," he muttered, his voice thick with disbelief as he continued to pace. "Paul, have you talked to your parents? What are the others saying?" I asked, my voice weak, but I needed to know. He stopped, running a hand through his hair. "Some are saying that it was a misunderstanding, that Nancy didn't mean to do it. But how can anyone justify pushing someone down the stairs?" His voice cracked, releasing his frustration. I took his hand, looking at him steadily despite the pain. "I know this is difficult, Paul. She's your sister, but she hurt me badly." Paul sank into the chair beside me, squeezing my hand tightly as he nodded. "I know, and I'm not going to let this go," he said with a quiet but fierce determination that made me feel that, despite everything, we would face this together. I tried to sit up, but a sharp stab of pain shot through my arm, causing me to wince. Paul quickly helped me lie back down gently against the pillows. "I know, Susan. And I'm so sorry, but I just can't understand it," he said, his voice filled with guilt. Just then, my phone vibrated with a message from Paul's cousin, Betty. I picked it up and read it aloud. "Susan, we're all shocked. Some family members are taking Nancy's side, saying you provoked her by not respecting her boundaries." A wave of frustration washed over me. "Provoke her? For using a bathroom? That's absurd," I said sharply, shaking my head. Paul squeezed my hand tighter and looked at me with determination. "I don't care what they say. I'm with you. This isn't something we can ignore," he assured me. Just then, the door opened and Dr. Joshua entered, his expression serious but calm. "How are we feeling, Susan?" he asked, looking at both Paul and me. I tried to smile weakly as I admitted, "I'm okay, I think." The doctor nodded and continued, "We've reviewed your x-rays. You have a clean break in your forearm, but thankfully no serious head injuries. We're going to put you in a cast, and you'll need plenty of rest." "Thank you, doctor. Do you know when I can go home?" I asked, eager to leave the hospital and regain some sense of normalcy. "If everything looks good overnight, you should be able to go home tomorrow. We want to monitor you to make sure there are no complications from the concussion," he calmly explained before leaving the room. When the doctor left, Paul sat beside me, his eyes filled with worry. "We need to decide what we're going to do about Nancy. This can't go on." I nodded, feeling the weight of the situation on my shoulders. Paul, this isn't just about me anymore. It's about making sure this doesn't happen to anyone else. Nancy needs help. Real help. You're right, he replied firmly. I'll talk to my parents again. This isn't just a family issue. It's something serious. As night fell, the soft beeping of the hospital machines accompanied my racing thoughts. The events of the day replayed over and over in my mind. I knew I would finally be going home tomorrow, but I also knew the real healing, both for my body and our family, was just beginning. When I arrived home, the living room was tense. The usual atmosphere of relaxed chatter and laughter had been replaced by an uncomfortable silence, heavy with emotion. The heavy silence filled the room as everyone gathered for the family meeting Paul had organized. He stood in the center, determined to address what had happened and ensure something like it would never happen again. The room was full, every seat taken, and a thick tension hung in the air. Every now and then, glances were directed toward the one empty chair, the one reserved for Nancy. When she finally entered, it felt like the atmosphere chilled further. Her presence sent a ripple of discomfort through the group. There was no need to call everyone here like this, Paul, Nancy muttered as she avoided eye contact and sat down. Paul's usual laid-back demeanor had vanished. His voice was firm as he began to speak. We're here because what you did to Susan is unacceptable, Nancy. You hurt her badly, and we have to talk about this. Grandma, her voice trembling, asked, Nancy, why did you push Susan? I can't believe it. Nancy crossed her arms, her tone defensive. It was an accident. I told you all 1,000 times. She invaded my space and I reacted. That's all. I took a deep breath, gathering my strength, and spoke firmly despite the pain I still felt. That wasn't just an accident. You could have hurt me much worse or even worse. A bathroom isn't worth risking someone's safety. How can you justify hurting someone over something so trivial? Uncle Timothy chimed in. His brow furrowed and visibly confused. Nancy, this doesn't make sense. A bathroom? You talk about boundaries, but you crossed one that's far more important. Nancy shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her defiant demeanor beginning to crumble. I told her before about using my stuff. She never listens, she replied defensively. I shook my head, my voice firm. I didn't know using the bathroom would lead to me ending up in the hospital, Nancy. We need to feel safe around each other. If we can't do that, what kind of family are we? My words seemed to hit home. Several of those present nodded in agreement. Paul chimed in, supporting me. This isn't just about respect, Nancy. What if something even worse had happened? Would you still call it protecting your personal space? Nancy's eyes scanned the room, meeting the gazes of the others. For the first time, her usual air of superiority seemed to vanish. She now looked small, diminished by the weight of her actions. No one was on her side. I didn't think it would be that big of a deal, she mumbled softly, barely audible. Paul shook his head, his tone calm but firm. It is a big deal, Nancy. This isn't just about a bathroom. It's about how we treat each other, about understanding and respecting boundaries. The room fell completely silent. Nancy's face reflected a mix of guilt and comprehension. Everyone knew this wasn't something that could be ignored or brushed aside. It was a moment of reckoning, not just for her, but for the entire family. I kept my gaze fixed on Nancy, refusing to back down. Everyone's making this a bigger deal than it needs to be, she said, her voice high-pitched and offensive. Suddenly, she stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly as it fell backward. That's exactly the problem, Nancy. Even now you're not taking responsibility for your actions, Paul said, his voice heavy with disappointment. Without another word, Nancy stormed out, slamming the door behind her, the sound echoing through the house. The echo of that sound seemed to linger in the air. Family members looked at each other, exchanging uneasy glances. The tension in the air gave way to a mixture of relief and sadness. Paul took my hand gently, his touch warm and reassuring. We'll figure this out together, Susan, he whispered tenderly as the family began to discuss ways to heal and move forward. We all seemed to understand that even though this moment had been painful, it had also brought clarity. What truly mattered was respect, accountability, and unity. As the weeks passed, my recovery progressed remarkably. Paul was by my side every step of the way, his unwavering support making all the difference. Our bond, tested and strengthened by this adversity, was now stronger than ever. Conversations about Nancy became less and less frequent. Her presence in our lives began to fade naturally, like leaves falling in autumn. The leaves were falling from the trees outside one evening as Paul and I sat together on the porch, enjoying the cool air. He broke the silence. "I heard Nancy lost her job," he said, his voice filled with sadness and resignation. "Really? What happened?" My curiosity was piqued even though I had tried to distance myself from her. "It seems there was an altercation at work. Her temper got the better of her again," Paul explained, sighing deeply. "Some of her friends have distanced themselves from her too. It's sad, really. I wish it didn't have to happen this way." I nodded thoughtfully. Maybe this is the wake-up call she needs. Sometimes hitting rock bottom is what makes people reflect and change. Paul looked at me, the disappointment still visible in his expression. "Yeah, maybe. How are you? How are you feeling about all of this now?" His eyes searched mine as if wanting to see any lingering signs of hurt. I took a deep breath before responding. "It's strange in a lot of ways. But facing that kind of betrayal from someone you thought was family, it forces you to reevaluate things. Makes you realize how important it is to stand up for yourself and what you deserve." Paul nodded and reached for my hand again. "You're incredible, Susan. I'm proud of you." We sat in silence, the peaceful night surrounding us. We both knew that while healing would take time, we were moving forward, stronger and more united than ever. I paused for a moment, letting the tranquility that surrounded us sink in. Paul took my hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "We're okay?" he asked softly. "Better than okay," I replied. His smile reflected the peace I felt in my heart. "This whole awful experience made me realize how lucky I am to have you," he added, his words filling me with a deep sense of gratitude. As the days bled into weeks, the ripple effects of Nancy's decisions became apparent. Her actions had left her isolated from the people she once considered dear. It was a harsh reality, but one she brought upon herself. One afternoon my mom called. "Just wanted to check on you, honey, and tell you we've all learned a lot from what happened. It's brought us closer and reminded us what truly matters." "I felt the same, Mom," I said, my voice steady with conviction. "It's been a tough lesson, but a necessary one." Reflecting on everything, I realized how vital self-respect and personal boundaries are. The situation with Nancy had tested my resolve, but it also highlighted the resilience, not just of an individual, but of a family determined to confront toxic behavior head-on. Sitting beside Paul, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Life would go on, even though the scars of the past remained as reminders of the battles fought and won, against negativity, against toxicity. These scars represent a commitment to creating a safer, healthier and happier future for ourselves. As I looked out at the setting sun, a profound understanding washed over me. This wasn't just the end of a painful chapter. It was the beginning of something new and better, forged through the lessons of our past. Now I'd love to hear your take. What do you think about setting personal boundaries within a family? Is there a point where enforcing those boundaries can be too much? Or should personal space always be respected regardless of the context? Please share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this story and want more content like this, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to us and helps us keep sharing stories that spark meaningful conversations.